Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I'm also the host of Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight, and I'm the editor of the anthology, which you should run out and buy, called Moms Don't Have Time to, a Quarantine Anthology. All proceeds of that book go to COVID-19 vaccine research. And I'm the editor-in-chief of Moms Don't Have Time to Write, a new publication on Medium, and we're accepting submissions, so please send your personal essays there. And if all that isn't enough, you can follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens, and my website is zibbyowens.com. Okay, now back to this amazing podcast. Jessica Anya Blau is the author of Mary Jane. She's also the author of the nationally best-selling novel The Summer of Naked Swim Parties and 3 other critically acclaimed novels. Most recently, The Trouble with Lexi. Her novels have been recommended and featured on CNN, NPR, The Today Show, and in Vanity Fair, Cosmo, Oprah's Summer Reads, and many other national magazines and newspapers. Welcome, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Mary Jane.
Yay. Thank you for having me. I love all your multiple platforms and media, and I go through it all and listen to things, and I think you're wonderful. So thank you for having me.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to have you too. I love your sense of humor that is in this book. I mean, I don't know if that was a primary intention, and maybe we should start with you telling listeners what your book is about and what inspired you to write it and all that. But I just you're so quick-witted and this sort of dark sense of humor. I just loved it. It's just so funny. Anyway, loved it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so the book is about a 14-year-old girl in Baltimore in 1975 who is the summer nanny for a psychiatrist who lives down the street. And over the summer, immediately she discovers that he's housing a very famous rock star and a movie star as the rock star tries to sober up, and they're hiding on the 3rd floor of this house in Baltimore. So that's it. That was the premise, and that's what I sat down to write. I wrote this book. I ghostwrite sometimes, and I had been ghostwriting for a celebrity, and she was lovely and she was very fun, and we had a great time, and she had no boundaries, which as you probably know, I'm from California, so I'm actually used to people who don't have boundaries. It's like, I can deal with it. Somebody's like, hey, no boundaries. I'm like, okay, I'm in. So she had no it was like FaceTiming from bed with her celebrity husband every night, and it was just like phoning every day and the entire, history of her sex life with every celebrity in Hollywood, which was very extensive and interesting and fun to listen about. To hear about. And, I kept writing chapters and writing chapters and writing chapters, and everything she told me, she didn't want in the book. So it was this incredibly creatively frustrating thing where she would spend, 10 days telling me about every star she'd ever had sex with. And then I'd write a chapter of it. I would hide everybody's name and, try and disguise who they were. And then I don't want to put that in the book. And then she'd tell me, spend a week talking about her famous family and this and that. And then I don't want to put that in the book. And then we'd spend 2 weeks talking about movie sets and certain movies she was on. And then I don't want to put that in the book. And it was just I was trying to write. And it was like I couldn't write it. And so we were kind of at a crossroads. And she fired me, which was
no.
Well, we had read her diaries together. And we were reading the diaries, and they were very smart and funny, and they were interesting. And I said, oh, you should just publish these diaries. And then 2 days later, she decided she was going to write the book herself, and she fired me. So it was, of course, that terrible humiliation of being fired and anger and heartbreak. It's like a guy breaking up with you or a woman breaking up with you. It's like a lover breaking up with you. It's like a friend leaving you. And then it's the humiliation of losing a job. It was just and I was just so sort of heartbroken and angry and upset and frustrated. And then I just thought, I just want to write what I want to write without anybody else having veto power or saying, I don't want to say that, or I don't want to reveal that, or I don't want to, it was so hard. And I'd ghostwritten for other people before, and I'd never had that problem before. So, I'd ghostwritten a few books. So it was a new thing that everything I did was rejected. So I sat down and I was like, I'm just, it was almost like a rage write at first. It was like I was so mad. And I just thought, I'm just going to write what I want to write. And I sat down and I started writing Mary Jane. And I was just, I wanted it to be 1975. And I was listening to Billboard's top 100 songs from 1975 the whole time I was writing. And I'd turn it up at the end of the day and dance in the kitchen and empty the dishwasher, and I mean, I was just I just was completely liberated. Like I'd felt liberated, and it felt really good just to have my voice be the only voice and my say be the say of, okay, this works and I'm going to do this. And so that's how I wrote Mary Jane.
Wow. Well, it's so great when the person writing the book is like going through some of the emotions that are actually in the book. Like you were clearly on this like journey. Not that happened in the story or anything, but even just that image of you dancing around, like that is so great. Like how can you then read a book and feel anything but that same sense of sort of like perseverance and joy and all of that, right? It's like it seeps in there.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. It reminds me of, what was that book? Was it Isabel Allende, the one where they would put the tears in the food they were making and you'd feel.
Oh, yeah.
Was it?
Yes.
Was that like Water for Chocolate, or am I mixing things up?
Yeah, I was going to say that. And then I was like, no, I'm sure I'm wrong. Yes, I think it was.
We might be wrong, or we both might
be wrong, but I'm on the same. Yes, that's what I think it is too.
No, that's such interesting. I love that you said that. It's so interesting. Yeah, because maybe it was, I mean, there was so emotionally, I was in such a sort of state as I entered this book. And so maybe it does come out. Maybe it's like cooking with tears.
It's true. It's so true. My husband cooks a lot and he's always like, well, I'm like, your food always tastes better. He's like, that's because like I put my love into it. He's like, I could give the same ingredients to a chef at a restaurant. It's not going to taste the same because like the emotion is out of it. So anyway, I feel like it's a parallel to this story.
Yeah, that's sweet. Well, and then a lot of this was written during COVID, and I was just like feeling like all I wanted was to go to a dance party, and all I wanted was to like hug people and touch people and just, just snuggle with somebody in a bed. I mean, I have kids too. I started having kids in my 20s, so they're out of the house now. So in the book, I'm definitely was putting in the things I need, like Mary Jane, holding Izzy or getting hugged or dancing, just this sort of like communal togetherness, feeling physically and emotionally connected with someone was such a fantasy just because of COVID and lockdown. So I was definitely, that was coming out in the book as well.
I love it. There's like the scene at the end, I'm not giving anything away, but when she like, euphorically kind of jumps in the car and they're all so excited, like, Mary Jane, you're back. And they're like all together again. It was like I felt like it was like a scene from Almost Famous or something, like it had that same like rock band, the gang's together again, excitement to it. So I could see that.
Yeah. Being part of something, being part of a group.
Yeah.
I mean, I am such a pack animal and COVID has been so hard on me, and just being part of a little pod, I like to be in a litter. Like I would love to be like with 6 people in a litter.
Yeah. Well, come on over. I have 4 kids and there are at least 6 people in the house most of the time. So
you're like, I wanted like 6 kids. I just thought I had 2, but I wanted 6. I just thought it would be so much fun.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, well, anyway.
You're doing great. You're doing an amazing amount of things for 4 kids back there.
Oh. Well, I'm kind of cheating. My son's at boarding school, so he'll be back in a couple of weeks. But anyway, so it's like 3.5 at the moment. There's a lot in the book, too, about obviously addiction, right? Because there's the psychiatrist and Jimmy is there for treatment. And that's sort of the premise of the whole thing. But I love this quote from Sheba. And she said, well, we're all addicts of some sort. Part of being alive is figuring out the balance between what you want, what you need, and what you have with what you don't want, don't need, and don't have. And then she says, I mean, Jimmy, man, you are so not alone here. This whole family, each of us, we're all addicts in one way or another. Tell me a little bit more about that and sort of the addiction to other things, not just how we're all kind of addicted to something.
Well, I mean, I do feel that, like I do feel that in life. And, and it really is like, how do you find the balance? How do you let go of certain things? I mean, everything, love and hate, even being angry, people get hooked into being angry about something. And it's like, there's so much that we need to let go of and so much that we need to grasp and maybe not grasp as much. So, I mean, it is such a part of life, just balancing all this. And I mean, it's interesting because COVID also has been, a lot of it has been letting go, like a process of letting go and acceptance and just sort of being where you are and accepting where you are and, and that kind of stuff. And, as far as addictive, behaviors, I've certainly had mine, but I've also, been with people and a family member, I've had a lot of it, I think we all have, haven't we? Don't we all?
Everybody's got a story.
Yeah, we all have people in our lives and families and all that stuff. And I think maybe the difference between people who are writing but it's just, you're either willing to talk about it or you're not. So, how do we talk about it, or do we talk about it? And certainly everybody doesn't need to talk about anything. I mean, I don't write memoir, I write fiction, but there is, in all my fiction, really is my internal life is being processed through there. And Mary Jane, one of my daughters read the book and she's like, Mom, Mary Jane is exactly you. It's just you. Well, and then a close friend read it and he was like, that's not you. You were like making out on the beach and drinking beer at 14. I was like, I was making out on the beach at 14, drinking. I grew up in Southern California and drinking beer. But internally, like as my daughters know me, that is me. Like I love organization and alphabetizing. Like I see your bookshelves are color and so are mine. I love like alphabetizing and color. I love like purity and cleanliness and order. And I love singing and dancing and I love Broadway musicals. There's just so much to love in the world. So really internally it is me. Although at 14, I was a little more rebel. I was in Southern California. You couldn't help it.
Yeah. Here in New York, everybody was very buttoned up, I'm sure, in comparison.
Yeah.
I don't know.
New York and California, everywhere in between. Who knew? Right. Everybody, right. In Indiana, they're taking a truck out to the cornfield and everybody,
This is why I'm like terrified about having twin teenagers at the moment. So
how old are they?
I'm like, I know what I was doing. What are they going to be doing?
Right.
They will be 14 very soon.
Boys or girls?
Boy, girl.
Oh, wow.
Boy and girl.
Yeah. So. Well, I did find in motherhood because I had so many, I was never completely off the rails, like, and so I never stole. I tried not to steal or cheat or lie, do terrible things, but I'd sneak out my window at night and go out with the boy, go to the beach and try and sneak back in at 4 a.m, and stuff like that. So there was, I don't know if you're finding it with kids, it was like, my daughters would do things and it's like, I did that. It's kind of like, am I really going to care or get up? It's like, you want them to have boundaries and you want them to sort of be contained and feel like there's some safe netting around them so they don't totally go off. But it's almost like everything they did was pretty forgivable because kind of, I did it too. It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
So tell me a little more about your writing process in general and like how you got your start. Like tell me about like your first published book and like how you became a writer.
Okay. So I was, I married my college boyfriend and we had a baby right away and he got a job in Canada. So we were in Toronto. And in Toronto, part of the thing was I wasn't allowed to work or go to school. They wouldn't give me a permit. So I suddenly was home. It was just like, and I was kind of going crazy. I've always been a reader like you, just reading like mad my entire life. And so I was home and he brought a computer home from work and I was like, oh, and I just started writing stories. And so I was lonely. I didn't know anyone. I was in the middle of Toronto and we moved there in the fall and it got cold really quickly. And I was lonely and I was alone and I got a dog because I thought, well, that'll help. And I found that if I wrote every day, I felt like I was okay. Like, because I would clean the house and I was a Balabusta, just like cleaning the house, grocery shopping, just taking care of everything. And I felt so sort of pointless. I felt so useless. But when I noticed that if I wrote every day, I felt like, I felt okay about myself. And so I was just writing and writing and writing. And so I spent a year writing just every single day. And it was a secret. I didn't tell anyone. In fact, I was home in California and I ran into an old friend and she said, what have you been doing up in Toronto? I said, I've been writing every day. And she said, do you have your own horse? And I thought, yeah, no, not right. She couldn't even think, it was so secret. So at the end of that year, I had, a bunch of short stories. And actually the truth is I had them on a disc and I gave them to this husband. I gave him one to print off and he printed it off. And then I had a year's worth of work on a disc and I gave him the disc. I said, can you just print off these stories on this thing? And he actually ended up losing the disc. So 2 years worth of work.
No,
it's just completely gone. But, I figure it was me teaching myself how to write. So it was probably garbage anyway. But there I got one short story printed and I mailed that short story out and it was published. And I was just so shocked at the time. I just thought, oh, that's really strange, because I hadn't told anyone I was writing. I didn't show anyone anything. And I just mailed out the story. And I just remember thinking, just like I really couldn't believe it. I thought they're going to publish this. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm doing an okay job here. Like maybe it's okay. So I thought, well, maybe I should apply to graduate school. So I applied to graduate schools and I went. And then when I got in, I was like, oh, okay, now I think I can say it out loud. I still almost didn't want to say it out loud, that I'm writing. And then I went and I just was publishing short stories and all that. And then I was at Breadloaf. Do you know it was at this writer?
I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was at Breadloaf and Lynn Freed was there, the South African writer who I love her books so much. And she had we were in this workshop and she told everybody to write one short story. And in her South African voice, the word write sounds like rat. And she said, everybody just rat one story. No, rat one line, one sentence. Just rat one good sentence. Everybody rat one good sentence. And I thought, I gotta rat a good sentence. I gotta rat what am I gonna rat? What am I gonna rat? And I rat one sentence, just one sentence. And it was a memory of being a kid in Southern California. And my parents and all their friends would swim naked and they have these big naked swim parties. And the kids, we'd all have our bathing suits on and they were always naked. And so it was just a memory of sitting on this, and this was in the 70s and stuff, just sitting on the steps of a pool and watching one of my parents' friends and man naked jumping up and down on a diving board and like instantly understanding male anatomy in a way. Like I had thought things were farther apart from each other. I didn't realize they were connected. And so it was this bizarre moment where I was like, oh, wow, weird. It was just, and so I wrote this just one sentence about that observation. And Lynn Freed, whose writing I love and I adore, she was just so like, she was very complimentary. And so I felt really good about it. And then later on at Breadloaf, I was talking to this sort of famous editor who has since died. And she had read a short story of mine in a magazine. And she mentioned that she had loved this short story. And I thought and so it's like, writing, you get so anxious writing. It's like my heart. And I was like, oh, you read that story? You like that story? And she said, yeah, do you have a book? Because you need to have a book. And I said, oh, I'm working on a book right now. And she said, you are? And I wasn't. I mean, in my head, and so I didn't have, and she said, well, what's the name of the book? And all I could think of was that one sentence I had written for Lynn Freed. And I said, The Summer of Naked Swim Parties. And she said, oh, that sounds great. Let me know when you finish it. And so then I thought, well, I better go write that book. So then I went and wrote that book and that was my first book.
Wow.
It was, so it was just sort of I guess I was always a writer because I was somebody who kept diaries and filled them. So I have diaries. So I'd been practicing writing since, second grade, writing in a diary every day, but I just didn't realize it. And so it was, by the time I was writing, I didn't realize, I really have been practicing at this for a while. So anyway, that's where it started. And that was the first book.
Wow. And then you said you wrote part of this during COVID, which I find like that just happened. So you like this came out so fast then. Tell me about like the process of that. Like, did you just whip out after you got over the breakup with the movie star? Did it all just come pouring out of you like very quickly?
The fastest book ever. Yeah. Pouring out. Yeah. No, pouring out of me really fast. And then because I am I have been living in Baltimore when I started the book actually, and that was right before COVID. And in Baltimore, I used to go to cafes and I would sit in cafes with other friends who wrote and we would sit there and we would write, and you'd say, okay, we're not going to talk until, you pick a time. And so then we'd write and then we'd look up and you talk for a few minutes and then we write. And so I'd just write in these cafes, and then get in the car, put on 70s, go home, put on 70s music, dance around, listen to music. And then in the end of December, I moved here to New York City. And then COVID happened in March. So so then I was here in New York and trying to write in cafes, but I didn't know anyone and just sort of writing by myself. And it was sad. It deserves an awe. because I was so lonely. I joined a gym and they had like a little workspace in the gym. And so I could sit in the workspace at the gym and I'd at least see other people and I would write there. So, and then once we locked down, I started FaceTiming with friends and we would write together. So we'd, get on FaceTime and be like, okay, we're not going to talk and then we'd write and then we'd look up and talk and we write. So, I just am not an isolation alone person. So I wrote, through all that stuff. And then all of the second drafts and the editing and the proof, the ending was the car scene that you mentioned, the driving off. That's actually where I originally ended the book. It wasn't exactly as it is when you read it. It was slightly different because it was the end of the story. But I was thinking sort of like that. Do you remember the movie Thelma and Louise? Mm-hmm. That just beautiful freeze frame at the end in the car. I had this sort of vision of this like liberation, even though I think they're going to kill themselves in the movie, but that's not definitely nobody's killing themselves in this book. But it was like this sort of liberation moment, freeze frame car. My editor, Kate, was like, no, you can't end it there. Like, no, this is crazy. So the ending was like, I don't know, because I've lost sense of time in COVID, but I feel like it was maybe 3 months or 4 months of me writing an ending, sending to Kate, her rejecting it, writing an ending, and then we'd be on the phone discussing it. And she'd be like, we have to feel that we want, me just thinking about it. I'm trying to process it and get in my head and get the right feel and the right emotion. Like emotionally, where do you want to end up and how do we end up there? And so the ending was just, a lot of work, all here with somebody on FaceTime, talking to myself. You say I'm always talking to myself and what? No, never mind myself,
Well, when everything is back to normal, I'm also in New York. So you can come over here at some point.
I love it. Yes. When all the kids are there, I want like the chaos of kids.
Yeah. Or other writers. So you're not alone,
No,
there's tons of writers everywhere in this city, I feel like.
No,
Are you working on a new book now?
I'm working on a new book now, and I think it's due in June, but I've been doing so much other pre-pub stuff and all this stuff. So I think it might be a little late, though. I'm usually really good at deadlines, but there's just been a lot of chaos and upheaval and, as you know.
Can you say anything about it? You don't have to.
Okay.
Okay. Forget it. Don't forget it. Okay. How about, do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I always need to take my own advice too, because I'm, such a nut job. But for me, it is sort of, people say like, what do they say? Like, know your reader, write for another or whatever. I'm sort of the opposite. It's sort of like, ignore your reader and write, like liberate yourself. I mean, there's so much like fear and anxiety and fear of a perceived reader and fear of like, is my mother going to read this? Or is my husband going to, or will my kids read this? And of course you don't want to shame people and out, like other than taking care of the emotional needs of the people you love in the world. It's like even writing the simplest thing, people are so scared, myself included. And so I think the best advice for me is always this, just sort of let go of fear, and follow your heart. I mean, and following your heart means following your true artistic impulse and not the perceived things. Everybody wants a vampire book, I'm going to write about a vampire. Everybody wants this, I'm going to write about this. I mean, people say to me, I'm thinking of, it seems like everybody likes blank. So I'm thinking of a book where blank, blank, blank. And it's like, well, is that really what you want to write? Because writing is hard. And like, how can you do it perfectly unless it's really what you want? Like if you think of painters was, Jackson Pollock thinking, I think splatter art would be in next. I'm going to just splat, like you have to really go for your true individual point of view, like your heart, your soul, and your very, very particular point of view, which is the only thing that great art is. It's one particular person's point of view in anything. So I think to do that, that's why it's scary, because it's so personal and is your particular point of view, even when it's fiction. So my advice to bring it all back would be just to accept that you're afraid and do it anyway. Let go of the fear, accept the fear, and just move straight through it.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming on my show and for getting to, chit chat today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.